Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Senate Republicans in the White House have agreed on a plan to slash unemployment benefits for the tens of millions of workers who've lost their jobs since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. For the last 4 months, unemployed workers have received an additional $600 per week, but Republicans want to reduce that to just $200. Many economists fear the cut could lead to a spike in evictions and a rise in hunger. This comes as the reported U.S. death toll from COVID-19 tops 148,000. President Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, has become the highest-ranking U.S. government official to test positive. O'Brien abruptly left the White House Thursday, but his staff reportedly only learned why from media reports on Monday. It's unclear when O'Brien was last with President Trump. In related news, the world's biggest Phase 3 clinical trial of a COVID-19 vaccine study began in the United States Monday. The vaccine was developed by the biotech firm Moderna and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. 30,000 people are expected to participate in the trial. On the same day, Trump traveled to North Carolina to visit a Fujifilm facility working on a COVID-19 vaccine and push states to reopen despite the recent surge of cases.
I really do believe a lot of the governors should be opening up states that they're not opening, and we'll see what happens with them. But a lot will have to do with the fact that therapeutically, I think you can have some great answers vaccine-wise.
The University of Notre Dame has announced it will not host the first presidential debate September 29th due to the pandemic. The debate will now take place at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and is co-sponsored by the Cleveland Clinic. This comes as schools across the country are deciding whether to resume in-person classes. In Florida, over 300 children have been hospitalized from COVID-19. The number has increased by 23% over the previous week. Meanwhile, in California, the COVID-19 death toll at San Quentin State Prison has reached 19. In other coronavirus news, former presidential candidate Herman Cain remains hospitalized. He tested positive in early July after not wearing a mask at President Trump's indoor rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The African-American former presidential candidate is in his 70s and a cancer survivor. The global COVID-19 death toll has topped 654,000. On Monday, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak the most severe global health emergency the WHO has ever faced.
This is the 6th time a global health emergency has been declared under the international health regulations, but it's easily the most severe. In the past 6 weeks, the total number of cases has roughly doubled.
In other international news, Vietnam is locking down its third-largest city, Da Nang, and evacuating 80,000 tourists after 15 residents tested positive, the first confirmed COVID-19 cases in Vietnam since April. Bloomberg's reporting the number of new COVID-19 cases are now growing faster in India than anywhere in the world. India already has the world's third most cases, behind the United States and Brazil. A coalition of Brazilian healthcare workers, unions, and social groups have filed a complaint with the International Criminal Court, accusing Brazil's far-right President Jair Bolsonaro of committing a crime against humanity by responding to the pandemic with contempt, neglect, and denial. On Monday, Bolsonaro removed his mask while greeting supporters just days after he announced he no longer had COVID-19. He tested positive 3 times, then negative. Attorney General William Barr is testifying before the House Judiciary Committee today on a range of issues, including the Trump administration's deployment of federal agents to Portland, Oregon, which has been the site of 2 months of daily anti-racist protests. Barr calls the protests, quote, an assault on the government of the United States, according to his prepared remarks. This comes as Trump is reportedly planning to send even more federal agents to Portland, which could include an additional 50 Customs and Border Protection officers. Meanwhile, a National Guardsman's appearing today before the House Natural Resources Committee, where he'll testify that the violent June 1st crackdown on demonstrators in Lafayette Square near the White House, which was ordered by Attorney General Barr, was a, quote, unprovoked escalation, unquote, and that protesters were, quote, engaged in the peaceful expression of their First Amendment rights. In related news, the Electronic Frontier Foundation obtained records showing the San Francisco Police Department engaged in mass surveillance of protesters in May and June using a downtown business district's camera network. The body of the late civil rights icon, 17-term Georgia Congressmember John Lewis arrived at the U.S. Capitol Monday, where he became the first black lawmaker to lie in state in the rotunda. Former colleagues, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, paid tribute in a ceremony honoring Lewis's legacy. Earlier in the day, a motorcade carrying Lewis's coffin stopped at the Martin Luther King Jr. and Abraham Lincoln memorials and the newly established Black Lives Matter Plaza, which Lewis visited before his death, before the procession made its way to the Capitol. Notably absent from yesterday's ceremony was President Trump. A reporter asked him if he planned on paying his respects to Congressmember Lewis.
No, I won't be going. No.
No, I won't be going, he said. Trump did not publicly acknowledge Congressmember Lewis's death until 12 hours after it was announced, after he had tweeted 40 other times. He tweeted then, "Saddened to hear the news of civil rights hero John Lewis passing, Melania and I send our prayers to he and his family," Trump tweeted. In election news, 360 Democratic delegates say they will oppose the Democratic Party platform if it does not include Medicare for All, which presumptive nominee Joe Biden does not support. A petition signed by the delegates reads, quote, "This country is currently in the throes of a catastrophic public health crisis. Millions of Americans have lost their health care insurance because of job losses. This crisis has highlighted the need to separate health care from employment," they wrote. In other news from the DNC platform committee, members overwhelmingly voted against proposed language that would oppose illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank and support conditioning U.S. aid if Israel moves ahead with annexation plans of the West Bank. In Sacramento, California, immigration rights activists protested outside the mansion of Governor Gavin Newsom Monday to demand mass clemency and the immediate release of people in state prisons and immigration prisons. Protesters chained themselves to the gates of the governor's home. This is Lisa Knox, an attorney with the legal center Centro Legal de la Raza.
We're here today, not just to ask, but to demand that Gavin Newsom live up to the values he says he holds and free them all.
14 undocumented activists and immigration attorneys were arrested at the action and released early this morning. In Malaysia, former Prime Minister Najib Razak has been found guilty on multiple charges of graft, sentenced to 12 years in jail. The charges stem from the multi-billion-dollar looting of the government's investment fund. Najib faces a total of 42 charges in 5 separate trials. Last week, Goldman Sachs reached a nearly $4 billion settlement with the current Malaysian government over its role in the corruption scandal. Goldman Sachs raised $6.5 billion for the fund, which was routinely looted by government officials, people working for the fund, and 2 senior Goldman bankers. In Britain, a trial is underway over the 2015 Mariana Dam collapse in Minas Gerais, Brazil, which killed 19 people and destroyed nearby villages as mud flow with millions of tons of toxic mining waste blanketed nearby villages. The Samarco mine was owned by the Brazilian company Vale, an Anglo-Australian multinational BHP, which is being sued by over 200,000 Brazilians, local governments and organizations, including indigenous tribes whose lands were decimated by the disaster. This is Guarani indigenous chief Caraí Peru.
What we had, they took everything. They finished it off. With what they did in our river, it ended everything for us. How are we going to survive with this polluted river? They have already killed us.
In sports news, Major League Baseball's postponed 3 Miami Marlins games after at least 12 players and 2 coaches with the team tested positive for the coronavirus. The news came just 4 days into the new season, which was shortened with games played in empty ballparks due to the pandemic. The team is now quarantining in Philadelphia, where they had just played. The development also forced the Philadelphia Phillies to postpone their home game last night with the New York Yankees. In other baseball news, the Tampa Bay Rays tweeted Friday, "Today is opening day, which means it's a great day to arrest the killers of Breonna Taylor." The MLB team also committed to donating $100,000 annually to local racial justice groups. Meanwhile, the NFL announced Monday it's canceling its preseason. And the New York Times revealed President Trump lied last week when he announced he was scheduled to throw out the first pitch on August 15th at Yankee Stadium. In fact, he was never invited. Trump made the announcement shortly before Dr. Anthony Fauci threw out the first pitch at the Yankees national game in Washington. Over the weekend, Trump announced he didn't have time to go to Yankee Stadium. In environmental news, Deutsche Bank is the latest major financial institution to say it'll stop funding Arctic drilling projects. This comes as Siberia continues to battle wildfires and record high temperatures spurred by greenhouse gas emissions from human activity. And a new investigation by the Public Accountability Initiative reveals major polluters and financial institutions are also funding powerful police groups across the United States. The companies include Chevron, Shell, and Wells Fargo, which pour money into police foundations in cities including Seattle, Chicago, Washington, New Orleans, and Salt Lake City. Carol Muffett of the Center for International Environmental Law said, quote, "This report sheds a harsh light on the ways police violence and systemic racism intersect with the climate crisis." And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York. Juan Gonzalez is sheltering at home in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.